This is Marc Tobias with Jim Christy at the USA Cybercrime Conference just outside of Washington, D.C. This is a group of about 600 security experts, cybersecurity experts mainly, that have gathered to exchange information for the past week. And Jim is the organizer of the conference. And this isn't the first one.
No.
Jim, first of all, what is everybody doing here?
Everybody here is networking and learning tools, techniques, and procedures, the TTPs, to do cyber hunting. So it's not a typical security conference where we're just trying to protect systems, because systems are going to be compromised. So what we're looking at is teaching the forensics to the cyber hunters so that they can determine what happened on their system and possibly who did it.
So is this the new term, cyber hunters?
I don't know if it's a new term. It's been around for a couple of years, but cyber hunting, everybody needs. The government doesn't have the capability or the responsibility to protect the private sector, unfortunately. It's up to each private sector organization and agency or company to protect themselves. The government's there to possibly prosecute someone if they can find them and if it's a big enough loss. But it's up to the individuals to protect themselves today.
What's your background?
My background, I started out in the Air Force back in '71 as a computer operator at the Pentagon. Then I became a programmer, and in 1986 I had an opportunity to apply for a position with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, which was kind of unique because the Air Force Office of Special Investigations was the first law enforcement agency anywhere in the world to form a computer crime unit.
And this happened because you perceived an opportunity because of the first documented hacking case that you were involved in, and you perceived that the military assets could be involved by hackers out of Germany.
Well, I actually got the job before we had the hacking going on. So I was a brand new agent. I'd been out of the academy for about a month and a half, and then we got called by Dr. Cliff Stoll, when we had the didn't know at the time, but we had 5 West German hackers working for the Soviet KGB breaking into DoD systems.
And this was actually memorialized in the famous book, The Cuckoos Nest.
Cuckoos Egg.
Or Cuckoos Egg. And what part exactly did you play in that?
Well, I was the original case agent on the case, and brought the FBI into the equation as well. So
could you have ever imagined 30 years ago, which is just about when that case was, where we would be at today?
No, I figured we would have solved this issue early on. It was a struggle from the very beginning, getting people to understand that unclassified information had value. In the beginning, when these unclassified systems were broken into, nobody really cared. Because it was unclassified, so it had no value. And it took quite a while before that changed. But today, we still have the same issues that we had before.
Well, we also didn't have the legislation then with regard to computer crimes either, did we?
Not all of it, but we did have
some, but
USC, Title 18 USC 1030,
yeah,
which has evolved through the years. In those days, it protected computers, not the data on the computers.
Right.
Today, it protects both.
So there's a perception in the classes that I've attended that this is all a technical threat and that it really isn't going to reach a lot of people. That's wrong, isn't it?
Absolutely. First off, it's not a technical issue. It's a people issue, and the technical side is just a tool. If you look back at every innovation man has ever had, the hammer, a rock, a bow and arrow, a golf club, they've all turned out to be weapons at some point. Somebody is going to take a tool and turn it into a weapon. And so we shouldn't have been surprised that computers were turned into weapons as well.
Well, and the real takeaway for me, having attended a lot of these conferences, is that everything is at risk. Everything is interconnected. Everything runs based on computers in the world, and it is the best attack mode for criminals.
Absolutely. Anonymity is built into the system, and today Computers, the proliferation of computers have infiltrated every aspect of your life. You know, everybody has a cell phone, everybody has a computer at home, everybody has computers at work, everybody's mobile, you know, and now you know, transportation, banking and finance, you name the critical infrastructure, they're all completely dependent on the internet and systems.
Yeah, everything is vulnerable.
Absolutely.
Do you think it's a fair statement today that the reality is that nothing is really secure?
It's to the degree of security.
Yeah.
Everybody has a little bit of security. You know,
Yeah.
even if you're open, if nobody knows you're there, you have
But
security.
well, but that is security by
everybody's
obscurity if they don't know you're there. Because today, you're lucky if you don't get attacked, and that really commerce and government really need to understand that. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. And, you know, we've seen even the highly classified systems of NSA and the Department of Defense have been penetrated. It wasn't from an outsider, it was from an insider. So everything is vulnerable today.
So what's your advice mainly to business? It seems to me that they're not really taking, a lot of them are not taking a proactive stance. It's defensive. Something happens, they respond.
Well, unfortunately, security is very, very expensive, especially technical security. And so a lot of the mom and pop companies out there really don't have the knowledge, the expertise, nor the resources to be able to address the issue. And they can be the soft underbelly to the other big companies that do have security.
So what do? Because it is a lack of resources.
Everybody's going to be responsible for having to provide their own security. So, you know, there's no way around it. Everybody's got to have their own cyber hunters or form a coalition of some kind, small companies. There's lots of associations out there that can help, but you can't just turn a blind eye to it.
And the problem now is a lot of companies are being attacked not directly through the companies in the commercial sector, but they're being attacked through suppliers, anybody that's got access as a trusted network.
Even customers. Yeah. Your customer could be your weak link.
So, and the government can't solve this problem.
Correct. Government is not protect. You know, if we had bombers coming across the borders, you know, the Department of Defense would jump up and intercept those bombers and protect America. But if it's electrons, they just go right through, and it's up to you to defend your own enterprise.
Well, and the problem is there's many more hackers than government agents, and the government doesn't have the resources.
Just in the United States alone, there are over 18,000 different law enforcement agencies. There are not 18,000 computer forensic examiners or cybercrime investigators in the whole flippin' world. So that means everybody doesn't even have one. So
well, and the other problem is a lot of their networks are vulnerable, as we've seen in news story after news story.
Unfortunately, that is absolutely true.
You know, police agencies, every government agency's been hacked. The best of our government agencies have been hacked.
Absolutely.
And so the question is, are we going to win the war?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know whether it's winning the war or surviving the war. I don't know that you can win it at this point. If we had taken notice and taken action back in the 80s when this first popped up, we might have been able to win the war. Today, I think we just need to be able to survive.
Well, that's not a very good prognosis.
Well, it's not a stagnant threat. It's an evolving threat. So as soon as you catch up, the bad guys have evolved and created new threats and new vulnerabilities.
And what about international cooperation through Interpol? I know they just formed a cybercrime unit. Is this really going to accomplish anything? We have 220 plus countries, I'm assuming a lot of which don't subscribe to any treaties. So when the hackers are in Romania or Zambia or wherever, well, how do we deal with this? Because we can't go get them.
It's a major issue, and it's no different than other crimes. You know, we have all kinds of internet fraud going on today, and you know, everybody's not created equal. Some countries don't even have laws against what's going on, so they are prevented from investigating, and then they may not have the training, resources, nor the expertise to investigate it if they did have the laws in place.
So why are these conferences, the value more is education and networking than anything else, to get experts together?
Yeah, this is not a managers meeting. This is technicians, investigators, hunters, cybersecurity folks. When they have a breach, and everybody's going to eventually have one if they haven't had it already,
right?
Didn't know that they had it. You need the cyber hunters to do the forensics to find out exactly what happened, when it happened. Are the bad guys still there, and what was their motive? And and we can't just keep patching the systems. We have to go after the bad guys. We have to be proactive, and there has to be an offensive. You can't just, one of our presenters was talking about the sword and the shield. You can't just, the shield's not going to work. You have to have a sword and a shield. So if it's an advanced persistent threat, our military, our intelligence community, our State Department, we have to use our weapons proactively to go after the bad guys. Whether that's financial sanctions on them, economic sanctions, or whether it's military force. You got to protect. You got to have an offensive capability. In the criminal world, you have to have smart prosecutors, smart investigators, and educate the judges. And we need to prosecute these people.
Is it correct that a lot of facilities don't even know they've been hacked into? They don't know that the hackers are there, monitoring, grabbing data. A lot of this is not evident unless you have the in-house expertise.
We've had several presenters here this week that have said that the average time between the actual intrusion or the evidence of the intrusion and discovering the intrusion when they go back and look at it is around 240, 250 days. So that's the average. So some of them have been in there in these networks for years and are still there. And so if you don't know what you don't know. If you're not looking, you're not going. If you're not hunting, you're not finding them.
And the reality is, this is very expensive for business.
It is expensive loss, and it's expensive to hunt. But hunting is cheaper than the economic loss that you could incur.
What's your advice to, now you're speaking to executives in businesses who know nothing about technology other than they have a computer on their desk and a smartphone. What's your advice to them?
You got to get in the ball game. You got to get on the train, or you get run over by the train. So this train has been rolling for a long time. It's got a lot of momentum, and the bad guys are doing everything they can to sabotage your train. You got to be on that train, and you got to protect that train.
And are we going to see a lot more targets?
Absolutely. We've seen the evolution. From kids, just for the challenge of it, or because they're virtual vandals, to organized crime now with financial and identity theft type crimes, human trafficking, and advanced persistent threat. So major countries around the world looking to steal our intellectual property, preparing the battlefield in case they ever decide to go to war with us, to take down defenses. But what's really scary is terrorism. Terrorism, those guys, nothing would stop them. If they had the capability and they wanted to do it, they could do a lot of damage to our critical infrastructure.
I wrote an article a couple years ago about a major takedown that was to occur against one of our major entertainment companies. And I labeled the group of hackers around the world as digital street gangs. Do you think that's an apt label?
I do. At this point, you've got loose organizations, virtual organizations, people for financial gain or vandalism or for political purposes, but that it runs the gamut. It's a tool. So you have big cat burglars, and then you have street thugs that knock you on the head and mug you. But everybody's using the same tools.
Is the cooperation between government and commerce, like with InfraGard, is this enough? Do we need more? What really, in closing, what needs to be done?
Well, unfortunately, the government doesn't share near enough information. They classify everything, and the intelligence community classifies everything on us. So the government is prohibited from sharing critical information with the victims and potential victims in the private sector. So the government, you can't depend on the government today to protect you. They're not going to share information. So you're going to have circles of trust with other organizations, other companies. Everybody's in this fight together, and you can't depend on the government to protect you. It's not, you have to create your own cyber neighborhood watch, I think.
Is there one organization that these companies really ought to be a member of? Or is there so many of them that
I wouldn't want to tout any one in particular, but they all have benefit, and you should join as many as possible, because everybody doesn't know everything.
And finally, where do we get the security experts for the next generation? Because we're woefully short of experts. The kids are not entering colleges in enough numbers. Where do we get these kids?
Well, we got to start grooming them in elementary school. Excuse me. You're going to have to start grooming these kids in elementary school, and there's a cyber defense competition, Cyber Patriot,
right,
run by the Air Force Association, does a terrific job, and it was for high school students. This year they ran a pilot and expanded it to middle schools. So they're reaching out now to more youth to get involved in the cyber defense. Then there's the National Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition, so you can move from middle school and high school up to collegiate. And there's a program that we started when I was in the Department of Defense called the Center for Digital Forensics Academic Excellence, where we set standards for digital forensics in academia so everybody can teach to the same standards.
I gave a speech 10 years ago that we need the equivalent of a Hogwarts Academy, but the real stuff, to start training kids really early, all the way through college. Do you think that's a viable idea, or do you think that's going to come? That the real science and technology for protecting our infrastructure, protecting America, whether it's commerce or government, do you think that's where we're going to end up going?
I think that's a pretty good solution. I like that. So, yeah.
Jim Christy, thank you very much. When's the next cyber conference?
Well, we don't know yet. So we're going to reevaluate next week after this one's over and see where we want to go and what time of the year. I personally would like to go back to the sweet spot that we had before in the end of January timeframe, but we're not sure at this point.
We'd like to thank you for the great weather in Washington.
Oh, yeah. And the floods, and we're building an ark in the back room here. So.
Jim, thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thanks for coming.